Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jill Hicks, and I own JH Consulting. It's a personal advising business. The bulk of our clients are gymnasts, and our goal is to help all athletes get recruited to college and represent themselves directly in a more confident way to the college coaches. All right, so today we're going to talk about some of the changes that are going on with the NCAA, and that is the recent announcement about the National Letter of Intent. So I didn't realize this, but the National Letter of Intent has been in place for over 60 years. And it's kind of strange to think that it's going to go away, but after I did a little research, what I found was it's not that it's going to go away, it's just going to look different. So there won't be um, the same formal agreement. It's going to look different. And if you ask me, it seems like this is happening because of the settlement with the NCAA. So athletes now are going to have contracts, I believe is what it said. And who knows what those are going to look like. And if you'll sign something, maybe it'll be different for every athlete. That's why it's not going to be a national letter of intent. Maybe it's going to be more of an individual one. Remember, this is all a lot based upon the sport of football and basketball, but mostly football. So the changes we're seeing are going to be impacted greatly in that sport and driven by the past of many football players not receiving the income they deserved from their name, image, and likeness. So today we're going to mostly be talking about not the NIL, but the NLI, not to get those two confused. So the National Letter of Intent, as we know from the past, was one day or a period of time, each sport was allowed to have their athletes who were seniors to sign a contract, and it was binding for at least that full year, sometimes for longer. So it gave the athlete and the coach, there were different pros and cons to the National Letter of Intent. It would give the athlete the confidence to know they were going to get a scholarship for a certain amount of years, which was great, whether or not they were injured or had a rough season. And the problem with that was sometimes for coaches, the athlete would come to the college, but not be what they were to the athletic level of maybe when they recruited them. So then there would be this binding agreement, and the only way it could be broken was if there were just a few ways. One was if the athlete broke any kind of university rules, college rules, or struggled in their academics to a certain level, or didn't go to class, for example, different things like that. So what this new, they're calling it financial aid agreement will look like, we're not really sure. I think by April 7th of 2025, a final hearing will be put in place for the settlement, and the settlement will have a trickle-down effect to the National Letter of Intent, is my guess. And we're all wondering, will all schools be impacted by this, or will it just be schools that are of the bigger conferences? And will some schools be allowed to opt out of these new changes, or will it be across the board? So I think athletic directors right now have a lot on their plate and a lot they're wondering as well. And they're keeping their eyes wide open and their ears open to everything they can find out, but nothing has been set in stone quite yet. So if your athlete is a 2026 and they just made a verbal commitment to a college, fantastic, congratulations. But remember, things could look a lot different when they go to actually sign something, a contract or an agreement, they're calling it, a financial aid agreement. So if the college coach is saying to them, you are one of our 12 scholarships that we have right now, that you will receive one of those that could just be the baseline. You could be receiving additional funds or a different type of contract. Maybe it'll only be for 1 year, and then your athlete has to do really well in order to keep it. I don't know. Nobody really knows for sure. Let me read some of the information so that it comes out legally proper. So the NLI will be replaced by a new financial aid agreement that will provide many of the same core functions as the past NLI and will likely be tied to the contract related revenue sharing models across all of college athletics. So I think there is going to be some governing bodies that decide how much money athletes can receive and not out of proportion. But what this is all going to look like is going to be different for every university. So obviously the bigger schools like Michigan, maybe Florida, Georgia, Clemson, the bigger schools that are in those big conferences are, my guess, would be receiving more money and have more revenue to share. So they might even have bigger NIL packages, is something to think about. The other thing would be, so if your athlete's getting recruited to those schools, things could really change for your athlete. I don't know how it will trickle down to gymnastics because every article I read, it's mostly about football and basketball. But the big question mark is, how will Title IX be impacted? So sadly, I saw Oklahoma just decided there will be no scholarships for the men's gymnastics team anymore. So these are the kind of things that we're going to see happen. These are the kind of changes that I think are going to be happening. So it won't all be great for our Olympic sports. That's just not the way all of this looks like it's moving. But if some universities have gymnastics, women's gymnastics as a priority sport is what they call it, then some of those athletes, probably gymnasts, will benefit maybe from this new information. Some of these changes will maybe impact, other Olympic sports negatively. They could become club sports. And that's what the article said in regards to the men's gymnastics team, that they saw it turning more to like a club program, which I think is really sad. And I just think of all the loss that there is to men's gymnastics and, the struggles that they have gone throughout this whole year since I've been a gymnast. I've just seen many, many men's gymnastics teams either go away or go to a club sport. And we don't want that to happen to any sports if possible. So I am concerned. It feels like this is going to be a lot about money. And what concerns me about that is, what is that going to feel like when we go to watch a football game? Let's say our college team, if we really like sports, and we turn on the TV, and 1 week it's certain athletes, and then down the road, maybe towards the end of season, that athlete is left and is going to another team or in the portal because they know they can get more money somewhere else, or the coach didn't like them. I don't think it'll be quite that way because there is going to be some kind of a contract, it sounds like, but I'm afraid that year to year, we're going to have a hard time attaching ourselves to, how you do a quarterback, a name, a running back, someone who rushes really well. You just get attached to those players if you're a sports fanatic. Like, I love football, and I just can't imagine what that's going to look like from year to year. It just feels like the potential is there to look more like the pros, where there's a lot of changeover, unless they have the money to keep those athletes, So I think it's going to be interesting. And like I said, April 7th of 2025 is when they're going to have more of the settlement information in detail given out. So I think that's the important piece of just being more patient and waiting to hear. But if you're going through the recruiting process right now, these are some of the thoughts that I would have. So getting to know the head coach really well is going to be important, because you want to know that they have a priority of you as a person more than how you're going to perform. Although how you perform is important. I get it. We've all been college coaches before and had athletes on our teams that were not performing up to the level, not interested in performing up to the level. And quite honestly, it would have been better to have them move along. And we were tied to those national letter of intents, and we couldn't do that. So sometimes I look back and go, yeah, there were always a few of those athletes on my teams, but I would say there was more athletes who I so enjoyed watching them grow through their lack of passion for the sport, but getting it back and becoming an amazing college athlete, because they were bound to that contract and they had to work through their issues. So how much of that is going to go away? So one of the things I think about is really getting to know the coaching staff at wherever you're looking. Do they have a moral and ethical compass that they talk about in how they're going to treat their athletes? Do they talk about how the athlete as a person and their growth through those 4 to 5 years are really important to them? And how are they going to enhance that? I think coaches like that in our sport of gymnastics are out there. And I would encourage you as a recruit to really listen for those kind of statements. And because those coaches are going to be the ones that are not going to just get rid of a gymnast on their team because they don't like them or because they're not performing one year up to their level. Maybe there's emotional things going on. Maybe there's stress. Maybe there's an injury. Maybe there's different things. And I think what's most important is finding a coach that you really connect with on a deeper level, and that they really do care about you, so that no matter what you go through those 4 years, they're going to stand by you as much as possible. And I agree, being a college coach, it is a business on their end too. So there is going to be changeover for good reasons. But for the most part, that would be something, I would really be keeping my eyes on. Um, let's see, I've had some parents ask me, you know, let's see, what are some of the pros and cons for the sport of gymnastics? And I would just say, if these changes happen, I think the good news will be there'll be some additional money coming to the sports that are a priority sport at universities, at those bigger schools. And so there will be additional scholarships to possibly some of these bigger schools that have the funding coming from football. So that will be very positive. But I think these contracts are going to make and design teams to look a lot different. And how's that going to impact like even nationals? That's something that I can't really picture. Like, how many teams are going to have the ability to have 18 girls that are on scholarships and other teams that can barely get to the 12? That maybe could have won nationals because it was more equal. So that part makes me sad, because I always like an underdog story. So that's going to be interesting. So I think what we all need to do is just continue to pour into our own kids' lives the information that money does not always buy happiness, and that they need to make the most of their situation, of course, but to remind them there's so much value in getting an education, graduating from college, and finding the right fit. And that's going to look different for everybody. And I totally get that some maybe football and basketball players out there, especially in those sports, they're funding their entire family, and they will look at this completely different. I even read an article where a company has already offered money to 10 high school football players, probably some of the top athletes in our country right now. And they are going to get 25% of that athlete's future funding, whatever money comes their way due to these new contracts. I don't know. I read a lot of comments that a lot of people are not happy about that because these are kids and it's kind of like taking advantage of them and the probably situation that they might be in financially. And so there's going to be a lot of changes, a lot of pros and cons, how it will impact the sport of gymnastics, especially women. I don't know. Acrobatics and tumbling. It'll also be interesting. I'm concerned for the aquatic sports. I like to hope that all sports will be kept at the same level financially, if not get better. But I have a feeling that just like that men's gymnastics team at Ohio State, it may or may not look like that in the future. So take a deep breath, continue to learn and listen about what's going to come our way, as will I. And come on back and I will be reporting as I get information directly from the college coaches and also as I read information that the NCAA puts out.